Hello boys and girls, are you ready for the ultimate 5150 6505 guitar amp shootout? I am. Today I'm gonna play 4 different contemporary 5150 guitar amps and I'm gonna compare them all. So grab a beer, buckle up, it's time to have some chuga fun. Alright, but first we need a little disclaimer, right? Because a lot of you guys know that I'm not the biggest 5150 fan. But that makes me a good referee, right? Because, you know, I don't care which of them sounds better. You're just gonna get my honest opinion. And, you know, this video is not about me fighting the 5150, it's about comparing the different models. But later in this video, after the comparison, I will try to explain and show you why I'm not the biggest fan of the 5150 of any of the models. Anyway, let me just clarify that. The 5150 is a great amp. It's an iconic amp, it's legendary, and it has been the most popular amp in metal for the last 2 decades at least. I just happen to prefer other amps. That doesn't make the 5150 bad, you know? I just prefer other amps, so most of the time when I do shootouts for a production with bands, I go for something else. If I want something more scooped, I go for a rectifier. If I want something more vocal and mid-forward, I go for an orange rockaverb. If I want something, whatever, more tonal, I go for my Brunetti amp. But that doesn't make the 5150 a bad amp. Who am I to say that? It's just my opinion. But again, that makes me a fantastic referee for today's shootout because I think I know how a 5150 is supposed to sound. Let's get started. Let me show you today's signal path. So, as usual, I'm playing my Fernandez Ravel baritone guitar, tuned to something low. I don't even know. Tuned to something low that I don't even know. What a nice rhyme. EMG pickups, as usual. I'm going down to my live room into a Mesa Boogie 4x12 cab, not loaded with a V30, but with my favorite speaker, the DV77 from Eminence. Again, if you like the tones you're hearing today, check out my official Eminence Digital DV77 IR pack, which I think has become one of the industry standards in metal these days. So many people have fallen in love with this IR pack. Link below, make me rich and famous, get that IR pack. Thank you very much. So, let me introduce you to the amps. And right here we got the flagship model from EVH. It's the 5153 Stealth model. 3 channels with dedicated controls. And Stealth, I think, means there have been some slight modification by Eddie Van Halen. So this is what he played. The last amp he really played. So channel 2 has more gain, channel 3 has whatever. And you got a few more controls and a few more features. You can dial in the resonance on each channel separately, the presence as well. Some cool features. The flagship model from EVH. And right below that one, we've got something special. This is the 6505 1992. That was a great year for death metal. So this is a new model from Peavey that goes back to the original 5150s. And let me quickly tell you a story behind it. So Peavey kept on denying, like over the years, that the new 6505s sound different compared to their older models. They kept on saying, hey, we build them by exactly the same standards, and that's why they have to sound the same, which is correct. But what happened next was they came up with the Misha Mansour signature model. What is it called? Invective, right? When they did that one, Misha told them, hey, the old ones sound different. Just listen to my old 5150 block letter one. And they checked it out and actually found out, oh wow, it sounds slightly different. And the solution was that some parts of the output transformer, if I'm not mistaken, had changed over the years. So the tolerances had changed, you know, and without anybody noticing, Peavey they were ordering the same parts and putting them together and, you know, believing they would be doing the same thing still. The sound slightly changed. And with this new amp, they're going back to the original specs of the output transformer from 1992, or from the first years of the original 5150. So I'm very curious to check it out. Then we got 2 more affordable options. One I'm sorry how shitty the amps look, by the way. I was too stupid to film them any better, to get 4 amps in one picture. So down here, I hope you can see it. This is the official Peavey 6505 preamp for the Synergy system. If you don't know the Synergy system, it's really, really cool. It's a module-based system where you can just swap different preamps for a very versatile, great sounding setup. I've done, I think, 3 or 4 different videos about Synergy already, and you can see it. I'm actually using 2 Synergy modules down here in my Brunetti amp, and I can really recommend that, because if you have a tube amp that has an effect loop, a tube amp that you like, you can get a pair of those, just a preamp, and with the so-called 4-cable method, you can just add additional channels to your existing tube amp. So cool for studio use. So I have the Brunetti, but I can also switch to usually a Bogner Überschall model or a Fryette Pitbull model. I really, really like this. Anyway, now I have the Peavey 6505 in here, but we're not going into the Brunetti power amp. I was thinking, like, which power amp should I use? Should I go into a 5150 power amp, or how should I do it? But then I thought, like, that's stupid. Nobody's gonna get a Synergy Peavey preamp just to buy a full 5150 or 6505 to, you know, then you just don't need the Synergy module anymore. So people are only gonna use this with other types of power amps. And what I'm using today, I'm playing this into the power amp of a Marshall JZM 2000 DSL50 amp. And the 4th option, you can see it over there, is the 6505 Mini or something. Peavey, without even asking me, they sent me that thing as well. 6505 Mini, 25 watt, but you can also switch to only 1 watt. A full tube amp, but I guess rather designed to be used at home, where you don't need the full output power of any of those monsters here. Enough talking, enough talking. So 4 options. Let me just tell you how I compared those amps. I dialed in a, let's call it standard chuga chuga rhythm guitar, metal rhythm guitar tone on all of them, and I tried to match them. I tried to get them all to sound as close to each other as possible, okay? And I want to start with the 6505 1992. And this really sounds like a 5150 to me. I gotta say that. It has the typical raw type of distortion. It has that grindy upper mid bite. It has a lot of sizzle in the highs, I think coming from the power amp. And it has that typical honky tonk 500, not a lot of mid range, but that onk 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 thing going on. But it has the grind, it has the, yeah, just a raw feel of a 5150. Yeah, not super pretty, not super vocal, but grindy, aggressive, and raw. Now I want to switch from the 6150 1992 to the EVH. Again, I tried to match them, like the EQ and everything, so they sound as close to each other as possible. Start with the Peavey. Back to the Peavey. Peavey. Let me tell you what comes to mind, or what comes to ear first. First of all, that typical mid-range, that 5150 mid-range that I just described, I can hear that a lot more in the Peavey compared to the EVH. The EVH sounds more hi-fi to me, and actually maybe has a more linear or more like nicer sounding mid-range, but less of that typical raw 5150 character. Let's start with the Peavey and go back to the 5150. It just has that raw feel that inflames. I can't say that I like it, but that's the character. Okay, let's go to the EVH. It has even more of that high-end sizzle, that rattle in the highs. It does have more low end though, and by the way, I tried to compensate that on the Peavey to get more low end there. It's not possible. So the EVH is a little thicker, or maybe the EVH seems thicker because it has less mids. Who knows? The EVH sounds like a cleaner, less mid forward and less raw version of the 1992 Peavey to me. Peavey. Well, which one's better? I don't know. There's no better here. Both cool sounding amps. It depends on what you want. I think that classic 5150 feel, that raw energy, I would go for the 1992, go for the Peavey, because for me it sounds like that old school 5150 tone right out of the box, whereas DVH just sounds more modern. Maybe it's also a little more versatile. Depends on what you want. Let's move on. So let's check out our third option, and that is the Synergy preamp from Peavey going into a Marshall power amp. I start with a 1992 again. Back to the 1992. So this sounds a lot cleaner and more precise. And I actually really like it. Back to the 1992. What happens if I scoop the mids here? I never really liked those honky mids, but you know, if you scoop them, the character is gone. That was always one of the problems I had with that amp. So, back to the Synergy. Where are we? Here. And this sounds a lot more controlled, I gotta say that. I actually like it. One difference being that you don't have that super high grind coming from the power amp. That's the difference. Remember, we're playing a Marshall power amp right now, and it just doesn't seem to be as grindy. I could have used, let's say, a rectifier power amp, and I think that would sound a lot brighter. So that's one part of this sounding more controlled. But also the low end seems to be tighter than on both of the other amps. Officially, they say the Synergy engineering team spent over 2 years working with Peavey to perfectly capture the 6505's tone, feel, and response. This is a no compromise collaboration, blah blah blah. All two preamp module. So this is the same preamp. It sounds tighter in the lows. It doesn't have that super high grind, that sizzle, but that I think that's a power amp thing. And it sounds a little more precise if you ask me. But, you know, the cool thing about this is that you can combine it with any power amp, and depending on which power amp you use, you can get very different results. One thing we haven't talked about is the noise floor. I'm gonna take the Peavey Synergy preamp out of the equation here, but because it really depends on the power amp you're playing. But let's compare the Peavey and go to the EVH. You hear that? The EVH is quite a bit more noisy. Interesting. And now we got a fourth option here, and that is, you can see it over there, the 6505 mini amp. First of all, I couldn't reach the same volume like with the other amps. The other amps are not cranked at all. By the way, you shouldn't crank any of those amps for modern high gain tones in metal, and I'll show you why in a second. But still, the 25 watt amp is not going to get as loud compared. Let's just start with the Peavey 1992. and go to the mini version. So from now on, I'm going to compensate the volume loss in post. And this shows pretty much exactly the difference between a small amp and a big amp. Just listen to the low end. And now let's go to the big Peavey amp. So even being a lot quieter, the smaller amp doesn't have the fat low end of the original amp. So that's one thing. If you want clean low end and high gain tones, you need a big power amp. The other thing, I have only set the mini amp to half its full volume, but I can already hear some kind of mid distortion going on there. And if you push it furthermore, you will hear what I mean. So this is what happens when you push a power amp fully. So you get no highs, no bass, just a farty and distorted low end and some weird and honky distorted mids. And I can already hear parts of that. I mean, the distortion is really cool and sounds super close to the other ones. Okay, so that 6505 mini amp is kind of cool. It has that distortion, but this is a good example that there is a difference between a big 100 watt or even more tube amp and a small tube amp. You cannot just buy a 5 watt or a 10 watt or a 20 watt amp and expect it to have the same power and the same low end like any of those bigger amps. At least if you want to play it at a decent volume. If you're just sitting on your couch in front of the television to play a guitar, that is cool. And the preamps, I guess, are the same, so that should be fine. But if you want to move some air, if you want to, even if you want to record, I really prefer the bigger amps, or at least a 50 watt amp. So this was a good example. Cool amp, mini thing, but if you want the real deal, if you want a fat low end, if you want an undistorted, like clean fat low end, you got to go for something big. But now it's time to quickly show you why I'm not, let's say, in love with the 5150 in general. I know you've been waiting for that. So what I never loved about the 5150 was the mid-range. I know everybody falls in love with it. I don't, because it sounds it has a certain honkiness and it sounds scoop and it just doesn't sing. And I personally prefer amps that sing a little more, that have more of a vocal mid-range and not that combination of being honky and scooped at the same time. So if I listen to just the mid-range of one of my favorite amps, the Brunetti Extra Lead, I can hear the mids sing. 5150. And that just sounds cheap in comparison, you know what I mean? I just prefer the Italian baritone voice. That's just like a thicker lower mid-range, a vocal kind of mid-range that I really like. And it just gets more extreme once you start pushing the amps, once you start using a boost, a tube screamer or something. Things get tighter, but then the 5150 gets even more and hollow, and the Brunetti just keeps on singing. I hope I could show you the difference. Alright, so that was my little 5150 shootout comparison. The first time I ever played a 5150 in any of my videos. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a comment and let me know which one you prefer. How much do you love the original tone of the 6505 1992? How much do you like the Synergy module or the EVH, whatever? You let me know, leave a comment. Don't forget to subscribe to this lovely channel and to ring the ding dong bell. Do me that favor. And looking forward to chatting with you down there in the comments. That's all for today. I see you in hell, motherfuckers. Bye-bye.